What you're about to watch is the complete entanglement and conflict of interest between the current Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, and the White House's Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. And no, it is not sponsored by Pfizer, but we will talk about them. But let's start with Chapter 1, the early years. So let's go back all the way to 2011. Somewhere in Florida, a woman named Susie Wiles is building what will become the most successful influence peddling operation in modern American history. She's running Ballard Partners, a lobbying firm that sounds like it should be selling insurance, but it's actually in the business of making rich people's problems disappear through the magic of political connections. And meanwhile, Pam Bondi is Florida's Attorney General, which is like being the state's top cop, except your main job is deciding which powerful people you're definitely not going to arrest today. She's building a reputation as someone who really likes Donald Trump, which will, in turn out to be the most important career decision she ever makes. But here's the thing about lobbying that nobody tells you. It's not about bribing politicians with suitcases full of cash like in the movies. It's more about creating a web of relationships so complex that by the time anyone figures out what's happening, the people who could stop it are already on the payroll. Wiles spent these years perfecting this art form, turning Ballard Partners from a regional Florida operation into a machine for converting political success and access into corporate profits. But let's move on to Chapter 2. Trump wins and everyone goes insane. When Trump won in 2016, Susie Wiles had a choice. She could join his administration and make government salary, or she could stay in the private sector and buy a small country money by selling access to her Trump connections. Guess which one she picked? Well, instead of going to Washington, Wiles decided to bring Washington to her. Ballard Partners opened a DC office and suddenly became the lobbying equivalent of a gold rush boomtown. Companies that had never heard of Brian Ballard were writing million-dollar checks for the privilege of having their problems explained to people who knew Trump. The firm went from making decent Florida money to pulling in $70 million during Trump's presidency. To put that in perspective, that is enough money to buy a small newspaper or finance a congressional campaign in every competitive district in America. This wasn't just success. This was accidentally discovering oil in your backyard level wealth creation. Now, Pam Bondi, meanwhile, was still being Florida's Attorney General, but spending increasing amounts of time defending Trump on television. She was building the kind of loyalty currency that in Washington is more valuable than actual currency, because actual currency runs out, but loyalty can be cashed in forever. Which brings us to Chapter 3, the lobbying years, or how to get rich selling democracy. During this period, both women were basically running a masterclass in how to monetize political connections without technically breaking any laws. Wiles represented 42 different clients, which sounds impressive until you realize that it's basically a new conflict of interest every month for 3.5 years. Her client list read like a who's who of why is this legal and how is this possible. By the way, I remember that she lobbied for a Venezuelan TV network, Globovisión, owned by Raúl Gorrín, a guy who was later charged with money laundering. Sweet. Well, she represented the Nigerian People's Democratic Party, which sounds like something you'd make up if you were trying to parody foreign influence peddling. She worked for tobacco companies that marketed candy-flavored cigars to children, because apparently there's no ethical bottom to the lobbying world. But this is when the degrees of separation between Wiles and Bondi fall to zero. Pam Bondi joins Ballard Partners after her stint as Attorney General ended. Because why not cash in 8 years of public service? Why not? She started representing Amazon, Uber, private prison companies, and foreign governments. Her client portfolio was basically a greatest hits album of companies that probably shouldn't have friends in the Justice Department. The beautiful thing about their system is that it's all perfectly legal. There are disclosure forms and waiting periods and ethics rules, but they are designed by the same people who benefit from the system, so they work about as well as you'd expect. But so far so good, right? On to chapter 4, the Pfizer plot twist. Here's where the story gets really interesting, and interesting in the way that makes you want to throw your phone across the room. While Pam Bondi was getting rich representing corporate America through Ballard Partners, she was also doing some side work for a little law firm providing legal services to a small pharmaceutical company you might have heard of called Pfizer. Now, you might think, what is the big deal? Lawyers represent clients all the time. But there's something you need to know. Pfizer was under active investigation by the Department of Justice for potentially bribing foreign officials, which is the kind of thing that the Attorney General would normally be very interested in. Bondi was earning more than $200,000 from the law firm that was representing Pfizer, while simultaneously making over $1 million from Ballard Partners. It's like being a defense attorney and a prosecutor at the same time, except somehow that's legal if you fill out the right paperwork. Not gonna lie, I love America. If you don't make it here, it's only because you don't have the right connections. Or know the right people. Or both. Oh well, the timing here is important because in Washington, timing is everything. Pfizer wasn't just any company. It was a company with a serious legal problems that could potentially be solved by having friends in very high places. And wouldn't you know it, Pam Bondi was about to get the highest place possible in the American legal system. Enter Chapter 5, the return of the lobbyists. Well, when Trump decided to run again, he naturally turned to the person who had made him the most money in Florida, Susie Wiles. She ran his 2024 campaign while still working as a lobbyist because apparently we have just given up on the idea that there should be any separation between campaign management and influence peddling. After Trump wins, he makes Wiles his chief of staff, which is basically the most powerful unelected position in American government. She went from selling access to Trump to literally controlling access to Trump. I'm going to let you figure out the implications of that. Pam Bondi got nominated for Attorney General after Matt Gaetz' nomination imploded faster than the Hawk Chua meme coin. And during her confirmation hearings, she somehow forgot to mention that she'd been working for Pfizer, which is like forgetting to mention you're married when you're applying for a dating app. Just a small detail, I guess. Well, the corporate world's response was immediate and telling. Companies started throwing money at Ballard Partners like it was a strip club and they were tech bros celebrating their IPO. 28 new clients signed up in the first 66 days after Wiles' appointment because nothing says ethical governance like a lobbying firm getting a massive influx of business the moment their former employees take over the government. Which leads us to Chapter 6, the Great Pfizer Investigation Vanishing Act. This is where the story stops being funny and starts being genuinely terrifying. Within weeks of becoming Attorney General, Pam Bondi issued new guidelines for the Department of Justice that essentially said, we're only going to investigate foreign bribery if it involves drug cartels or international criminal organizations. Now, this might sound reasonable until you realize that, hey, wait a second. Pfizer's alleged bribery activities in China and Mexico didn't involve drug cartels. Oh. They involved regular old-fashioned corporate corruption, which apparently is no longer a priority for the Department of Justice when the Attorney General used to work for the company being investigated. And the result was predictable. The DOJ dropped its investigation into Pfizer, citing insufficient evidence. The same investigation that had been ongoing for years suddenly became insufficient the moment Pfizer's former legal counsel took over the Justice Department. It's like a magic trick, except instead of making a rabbit disappear, they made a federal criminal investigation disappear. The timing was so obvious that even people who don't usually pay attention to this stuff started asking questions. But in Washington, having obvious conflicts of interest is not a bug. It is a feature. The system is designed to make this kind of thing legal even when it's obviously wrong. And when we say the words obviously wrong, we 100% have to land on Chapter 7, the Epstein files meltdown. Just when you thought this story couldn't get any weirder, the Jeffrey Epstein files controversy exploded. Pam Bondi had claimed in February that an Epstein client list was sitting on her desk, which turned out to be about as accurate as saying that monkey NFTs are a sound investment. When the truth, with quotation marks, came out that there was no client list, it led to a confrontation between Bondi and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. Was so heated, Bongino took a day off work afterward. I made a video of that meltdown on my Body Language Guy channel, by the way. And guess who allegedly was in the room for this meltdown? Susie Wiles. Because apparently she's now involved in every major decision that could embarrass the administration. This controversy perfectly illustrated the problem with having lobbyists around the government. When your entire career has been built on managing information for wealthy clients, the line between managing information and covering things up gets pretty blurry pretty fast. Just as fast as we get to Chapter 8. The internet loses its mind. The documented conflicts of interest were bad enough, but the internet being the internet, people started connecting dots that may or may not actually be connected. Social media exploded with theories about the Wiles and Bondi being besties who coordinate to protect pharmaceutical interests and foreign governments. Some of these theories are obviously ridiculous, like claims about secret cabals and elaborate cover-ups. But here's the thing about conspiracy theories. They flourish in environments where the actual documented corruption is so obvious that people assume it must be even worse than it appears. When the Attorney General literally worked for a company that she then stopped investigating, when the Chief of Staff's old lobbying firm is signing new clients faster than Herbalife in the 80s, when two people from the same influence peddling operation are running the executive branch of the federal government, maybe, just maybe, the conspiracy theories are not the real problem. The conspiracy theories are just a symptom of a system so obviously corrupt that people assume there must be even more corruption hidden underneath. So we arrive at Chapter 9. Welcome to the blonde jungle. So here we are. The two most powerful women in America outside of the presidency are both former lobbyists from the same firm, and their former clients are getting exactly the kind of treatment you would expect former clients to get. The Pfizer investigation disappeared. Corporations are lining up to pay Ballard partners for access they are obviously expecting to get. And somehow, this is all perfectly legal. This isn't just another example of the revolving door between government and lobbying. This is the revolving door becoming a superhighway with no speed limits and no cops. We have moved beyond regulatory capture into something more like regulatory annexation. The most depressing part isn't that this happened. It is that it is working exactly as designed. The ethics rules, the disclosure requirements, the waiting periods before lobbyists can join government, they're all theater designed to make us feel better about a system that was built to be gamed. Susie Wiles and Pam Bondi didn't break the system. They mastered it. They figure out how to turn political connections into wealth and then turn that wealth back into political power, creating a feedback loop that would make a tech startup CEO weep with envy. No ChatGPT needed. This was done the old-fashioned way. The real tragedy is that in a few years, when they leave government, they will go back to the private sector and make even more money selling access to whatever connections they've made in the government. And then the next group of lobbyists will take their place, and the cycle will continue because we have created a system where the people who could fix it are the same people who benefit from keeping it broken. Welcome to America in 2025, where democracy is a subscription service and most of us cannot afford the premium plan. The Wiles Bondi entanglement is just the logical endpoint of a system that treats government service as a business opportunity. And business, as they say, is booming. But I would like to know what you think about this in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my political commentary. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Power Pundit. Much love and bliss.